Lucas Rivera had worked as a janitor at Hale Corporation for nearly 5 years. Every evening, when the executives packed up their laptops and disappeared into sleek black cars, he began his shift. The towering glass building in downtown Chicago transformed after dark. The noise faded. The marble floors echoed with the sound of his mop gliding back and forth. Lucas didn't mind the quiet. In fact, he preferred it. He was 32, disciplined, and observant. While others overlooked him, he noticed everything. He saw which executives barked orders at assistants and which ones stayed late helping their teams. He noticed the CEO most of all, Victoria Hale. Victoria was known throughout the city as a powerhouse. At 38, she had inherited the company from her father and doubled its value within 6 years. Business magazines praised her intelligence. Investors admired her bold decisions. Employees respected her authority, but feared her distance. Lucas had never spoken more than 2 words to her. Usually, she passed him without a glance, lost in thought or speaking sharply into her phone. That evening seemed ordinary. Lucas was cleaning the top floor, the executive level. The hallway lights were dim, casting long reflections across the polished floors. He assumed everyone had left. But as he pushed his cart past the CEO's office, he noticed the door slightly open. A warm light spilled into the corridor. He hesitated. Inside, Victoria stood by the window, still in her tailored navy suit, staring at the city skyline. She looked different, less composed. Almost tired. Lucas quietly began mopping near the doorway, hoping not to disturb her. "Lucas," she said suddenly. He nearly dropped the mop. She knew his name. "Yes, ma'am," he replied carefully. She turned to face him fully. Up close, he noticed faint shadows beneath her eyes. Not weakness, just exhaustion. "I need a favor," she said. Lucas blinked. "A favor? There's a charity gala tonight," she continued. "I'm expected to attend. I need someone to accompany me." He assumed she meant security. "Or an assistant." Then she said, clearly, "Would you come with me?" The question hung in the air. Lucas stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "Ma'am, I'm the janitor." "I'm aware," she replied calmly. He searched her expression for humor. There was none. "Why me?" he asked before he could stop himself. Victoria studied him for a long moment. "Because you don't look at me the way others do." He didn't understand. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Everyone at that party wants something from me, money, contracts, influence. I'm tired of being surrounded by people who see only my title." Lucas swallowed. This felt unreal. "I've watched you," she added. "You treat the security guards, the interns, everyone, with the same respect. You don't try to impress anyone. You just do your work." He felt heat rise to his face. No one had ever described him like that before. "I'm not asking you to pretend to be someone you're not," she said. "Just be yourself." Lucas looked down at his worn work shoes. He had never attended a formal event in his life. He didn't belong in rooms with billionaires and politicians. But something in her eyes wasn't commanding. It was pleading. After a long silence, he nodded slowly. "I'll come," he said. For the first time that night, Victoria smiled, not the polished smile she wore for cameras, but a small, genuine one. Neither of them realized that a simple invitation would blur the lines between 2 very different worlds. Lucas had never worn a suit that fit perfectly. When Victoria handed him a garment bag an hour later and told him to change in the executive lounge, he hesitated before even touching the fabric. The suit was charcoal gray, tailored, sharp. It looked like something worn by men who owned companies, not by men who cleaned them. "You look fine," Victoria said when he stepped out, adjusting his tie awkwardly. He didn't feel fine. He felt like an imposter. The gala was being held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, one of the most luxurious venues in the city. Cameras flashed outside as black cars lined the entrance. When Victoria stepped out of the car, poised and elegant in a deep emerald gown, photographers instantly began shouting her name. Lucas followed her, trying to stay calm. Inside, crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead. A live orchestra played softly near the marble staircase. Women in designer gowns and men in expensive tuxedos filled the ballroom, holding glasses of champagne and speaking in polished tones. Lucas suddenly became aware of every step he took. Whispers began almost immediately. "Who is he? Is that her new partner? I've never seen him before." Victoria didn't flinch. Instead, she gently looped her arm through his. "Stay close," she murmured. He nodded. As they moved through the crowd, Victoria introduced him simply as Lucas. No title. No explanation, just his name. Strangely, that gave him confidence. But not everyone was welcoming. At one table sat Harold Whitmore, one of the company's largest investors. He was older, loud, and known for his arrogance. As Victoria approached, Harold's eyes shifted toward Lucas. Well, Harold said with a smirk. Victoria, you're full of surprises. Who's your friend? Lucas, she replied evenly. Harold extended a hand lazily. And what do you do, Lucas? The question carried weight. It wasn't curiosity, it was a test. Lucas could feel several guests listening closely. For a brief moment, insecurity crept in. He could lie, say he was in consulting, finance, something impressive. Instead, he answered honestly. I work at Hale Corporation. Harold raised an eyebrow. Oh, in what department? Facilities. A faint chuckle rippled around the table. Harold leaned back. Facilities. That's important work. The condescension was obvious. Victoria's jaw tightened, but Lucas surprised even himself by remaining calm. Every role is important, Lucas replied steadily. A company doesn't function without people who take care of the details others overlook. Silence followed. Harold opened his mouth to respond but stopped. There was no sarcasm in Lucas's voice. No shame. Just truth. And, Lucas added politely, I've learned that leadership isn't about titles. It's about how people are treated when no one's watching. Now the table was completely quiet. Victoria felt something shift in the air. For once, someone had spoken in her presence without trying to impress her, or intimidate others. Harold forced a tight smile. Well said. As they moved away, Victoria looked at Lucas with surprise. You handled that better than most executives would have, she said softly. Lucas exhaled slowly. I just told the truth. For the first time since arriving, Victoria's smile reached her eyes. The rest of the evening unfolded differently. People who had initially dismissed Lucas began speaking to him with curiosity. He didn't boast. He didn't flatter. He simply listened and responded with thoughtful honesty. And Victoria, surrounded by wealth, power, and ambition, felt something unfamiliar beside her. Ease. For once, she wasn't performing. She was simply standing next to someone real. As the night deepened, the music grew louder and the conversations more animated. Laughter echoed across the ballroom, glasses clinked, and cameras continued to flash. But for Victoria, the noise began to feel suffocating. Excuse me, she whispered to Lucas after another forced conversation with a potential partner. Without waiting for a response from the group around her, she walked toward the balcony doors. Lucas followed quietly, sensing she didn't want to be alone. The cold night air hit them instantly as they stepped outside. The city skyline glittered beneath the dark sky, cars moving like tiny streams of light far below. Victoria placed both hands on the railing and took a slow breath. I hate these events, she admitted. Lucas stayed a respectful distance away. You hide it well. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. That's the problem. I hide everything well. For a moment, neither spoke. Inside, the music swelled as someone announced another donation. Applause followed. It sounded distant out here. They all see a title, Victoria continued quietly. CEO, heiress, power, influence. They don't see the person behind it. Lucas studied her carefully. The confident woman from the boardroom was gone. In her place stood someone exhausted from carrying expectations. I've spent years proving I deserve my position, she said. Stronger than my father. Smarter than the board thinks. Tough enough to survive in rooms full of men who underestimate me. Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly steadied it. And now? Lucas asked gently. Now I'm tired. The honesty in her tone surprised even her. She turned to face him. Do you know what it feels like to never know if someone likes you, or just needs you? Lucas didn't answer immediately. He thought about it carefully. I know what it feels like to be invisible, he said. People walk past you, talk over you, assume they know your worth without ever asking your name. Victoria's expression softened. But invisible and admired aren't that different, he continued. In both cases, people don't really see you. The words settled between them. Victoria felt something loosen in her chest. That's why I asked you tonight, she confessed. I've noticed you for months. You greet everyone the same way. You don't try to impress anyone. You don't look at me like I'm a prize to win or a threat to fear. Lucas shifted slightly, uncomfortable with praise. You look at me like I'm human. He met her gaze fully now. You are. No hesitation. No flattery. Just truth. For the first time in years, Victoria felt understood without needing to explain herself. No strategy. No negotiation. No performance. Were you scared? She asked suddenly. When I invited you. Yes, Lucas admitted honestly. I still am. She smiled faintly. Why did you come? He thought for a moment. Because you didn't ask like a CEO giving an order, he said. You asked like someone who didn't want to be alone. The city lights reflected in her eyes as silence wrapped around them. It wasn't awkward. It was steady. Inside the ballroom, another round of applause erupted. But out here, something quieter, and far more meaningful, was happening. For the first time that night, Victoria didn't feel like the most powerful person in the room. She felt like a woman standing beside someone who saw her clearly. And Lucas realized that behind the title of CEO was not a symbol of success, but a person longing for something real. When they returned to the ballroom, something had changed. Victoria still carried herself with authority, but the tightness in her shoulders had eased. Lucas walked beside her with quiet confidence, not as a prop, not as a statement, but as himself. The gala concluded with speeches and final pledges. When Victoria stepped onto the stage to thank the guests, her voice was steady but warmer than before. Tonight isn't just about generosity, she said, scanning the room. It's about remembering the value of people beyond titles and status. For a brief second, her eyes found Lucas in the crowd. And sometimes, she added, the most important perspectives come from where we least expect them. The applause was strong, but what mattered to her wasn't the sound, it was the meaning behind her words. Later, outside the hotel, the cool air wrapped around them again. The crowd had thinned, and the flashing cameras were gone. Victoria turned to Lucas. Thank you, she said sincerely. You have no idea what tonight meant to me. I was just standing next to you, he replied lightly. No, she shook her head. You were doing much more than that. She reached into her small evening clutch and pulled out an envelope. Lucas frowned. What's that? A token of appreciation, she said. For stepping into a world that wasn't yours. He didn't take it. Victoria, I didn't come for money. I know, she said softly. That's why you deserve it. He looked at the envelope again, then back at her. Slowly, he pushed it back toward her hand. If you really want to thank me, he said carefully, then stop thinking you have to pay people to stay. Her breath caught slightly. I came because you asked, he continued. Not because I expected something in return. And if you want real connections, you can't build them with transactions. No one had spoken to her like that in years. Most people accepted what she offered without hesitation. Some even demanded more. But Lucas stood there, respectful, calm, and firm. You don't need to impress anyone, he added. The right people will stay because they want to. Not because they benefit. Silence stretched between them, but it felt thoughtful, not uncomfortable. For a moment, Victoria saw herself clearly, how often she used wealth as both shield and solution. How often she assumed value had to be exchanged to be earned. You really don't want the envelope? She asked one last time. He smiled gently. No, ma'am, she sighed. Then stop calling me that. He hesitated. Victoria. The way he said her name, without fear, without calculation, felt strangely powerful. The following Monday, an unexpected announcement echoed through Hale Corporation. Lucas Rivera would no longer be working in facilities. Instead, he had been offered a newly created role in community relations, focused on employee engagement and internal culture. The board was confused. Some executives were skeptical. But Victoria was certain. Leadership, she realized, wasn't just about profit margins and acquisitions. It was about people. And Lucas understood people in a way spreadsheets never could. That evening, as Lucas prepared to leave the building, no mop in hand this time, Victoria approached him once more. There's a small cafe down the street, she said casually. No photographers. No investors. Just coffee. He raised an eyebrow. Is this a business meeting? She smiled. No, she said. This time, it's just dinner. And as they walked out together, not as CEO and janitor, but simply as Victoria and Lucas, something new began.